Okay. Hello, everyone. Hope your day is going good so far. Glad you could join us here. I'm just gonna hand it right over to Corin, let him do his thing. So go right ahead.
Great, thank you very much. Hi everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to present this paper on the Creative Musicianship programme at Edinburgh Napier University in Scotland. My name is Corin Anderson and I'm a PhD music student at Edinburgh Napier University. I'm also the lead tutor on the university's Creative Musicianship programme, which is what I will of course be talking about today. So, Creative Musicianship is a widening participation programme by Edinburgh Napier University that's currently being piloted in 2 secondary schools in Scotland. The programme was devised by Dr. Zach Moyer and Bryden Stilley as an alternative to the Scottish secondary school music curriculum in response to research that uncovered problems with secondary school music courses in Scotland. The Creative Musicianship programme is currently split into 2 levels of study and comprises of 4 overlapping units: performance, composition, theory, and communication. The programme was designed to prepare socio-economically disadvantaged learners for higher education level study by enabling them to meet HE entry requirements and by mirroring an HE learning environment through use of a VLE and a flipped classroom approach. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the resulting lockdown in Scotland, I was tasked with moving the programme online and revising the programme's content, assessments and structure to enable project-based learning activities to be carried out at home through the use of Moodle Community, a virtual learning environment, WebEx Meetings, video conferencing software, and Soundtrap, an online digital audio workstation. In this paper, I will first discuss what led to the development of the programme. I will then reflect on the design and delivery of the Creative Musicianship programme before explaining how it has been transformed from a blended learning programme into a fully online course in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. In this opening section of my presentation, I will first provide some background information on the Scottish education system. I will then discuss the research conducted by Moyer and Stilley in 2018 that led to the development of the Creative Musicianship programme. In Scotland, students in their 4th, 5th and 6th years, the last 3 years of high school, sit national qualifications to prepare them for work or for further study at university or college. Typically, students work towards National 5 qualifications in around 6 or 7 subjects in their 4th year at high school when they are 15 years old, although the less academically inclined may instead be recommended to sit National 4 qualifications. Both National 4 and National 5 courses are written and accredited by the Scottish Qualifications Authority, the SQA, who are responsible for the delivery of examinations for school pupils in Scotland. A system known as the Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework, the SCQF, is used to measure difficulty and challenge of all qualifications offered in schools, further education colleges and higher education universities across Scotland. National 4 qualifications are at level 4, while National 5s are at level 5. In their 5th year of high school, students will typically progress to level 6. Level 6 qualifications in Scotland are known as Highers, and it is these that universities will typically set as a minimum entry requirement for candidates applying to their undergraduate programmes of study. Edinburgh Napier University's BA Music programme, for example, requires those applying for Year 1 entry to achieve a minimum of 1A, 1B and 2 Cs at higher level. However, research by Dr. Zach Moyer and Bryden Stilley, 2 of my colleagues at Edinburgh Napier University, found that undergraduate popular music students in Scotland felt that the National 4, National 5 and higher music courses failed to adequately prepare them for university level study. In the core secondary school music curriculum, students are discouraged from performing the most challenging of pieces. Ensemble work and all the communication skills that go with it tend to be neglected. Students are taught to identify problematic concepts centred around Western art music styles in lieu of learning useful popular music theory, and students are constrained creatively when composing music. Additionally, Moyer and Stille note that it is not only the music students themselves who have noticed the many deficiencies in their school music education. The author's own departmental colleagues have also noticed that applicants are often somewhat lacking in other musical skills and knowledge that staff have identified as valuable for fully engaging with their undergraduate music programme. They conclude that due to the pronounced differences in the ways in which classical music and popular music are taught and learned, there should be a dedicated popular music education at secondary level in Scotland. This leads us to the inception of the Creative Musicianship programme. Devised by Dr. Zach Moyer and Bryden Stille as a creative, popular music-focused alternative to the SQA music curriculum in Scottish secondary schools, and credit-rated by further education institution Newbattle Abbey College, the programme was first delivered in the academic year 2019-20 in a blended learning format at two secondary schools in Scotland, Dalkeith High School and St David's High School. The two schools shared a campus, and so classes were held on-site on Friday afternoons. Between classes, students were set tasks to complete in their own time. Many of these tasks involved accessing Moodle Community, the virtual learning environment used by Edinburgh Napier University, where resources such as video tutorials, digital books, and discussion forums were hosted. Entry to the programme was based on interview and audition, with special preference given to students coming from the most deprived socio-economic backgrounds. In other words, those who were least likely to be able to afford private music tuition. Funded by Edinburgh Napier University, the programme was kept entirely free to the students, their families, and the schools. In the first year of the programme, Creative Musicianship was split into 4 units or classes: performance, composition, theory, and communication. As a PhD student at the university with teaching experience, I was put in charge of the delivery of the programme. I planned and taught the composition and theory group classes and managed a team of 7 instrumental and vocal tutors who were current 3rd and 4th year students and recent graduates from the BA in popular music at Edinburgh Napier, and who took responsibility for the performance part of the course. Students received one-to-one lessons on their instrument from these tutors. Students were also put into bands and learned how to perform as part of an ensemble under the supervision of myself and my team. The communication group class, meanwhile, was taught by a member of staff from Newbattle Abbey College, the further education institution that we had partnered with in order to get the programme accredited. The programme utilised a bi-weekly structure. In A weeks, students attended communication, theory, and composition classes, and in B weeks, students rehearsed in their bands with one-to-one lessons organised around band practice. This iteration of the programme was accredited at SCQF Level 5, the same level as an SQA National 5 music qualification, which a student would typically sit in their 4th year of high school aged 15 or 16. The learning outcomes for the Creative Musicianship 1 programme are on screen now. So the performance part of the course was assessed through a live performance exam at Newbattle Abbey College. The tutors also wrote a report on the extent each of their students had developed as performers since the start of the programme. For the composition unit, students were assessed on 2 original compositions they had been working on in class, along with the accompanying rationales and lead sheets or graphic scores that they had made. Students were assessed on the theoretical knowledge they had acquired over the course of the programme in an online theory exam, and for the communication assessment, students were required to submit a reflective blog in which they discussed and reflected on their development as musicians. Shortly before the COVID-19 pandemic hit Scotland, I held a consultative meeting with the students to hear from them how they felt the course was progressing, with the intention to implement any suggestions they had for changes that could be made to the programme in order to improve it. Their suggestions included, for the communication unit, reforming the unit to give it more of a music focus. For the theory unit, they asked for more of a practical approach to learning popular music theory, and for more integration with the theory and the composition classes. For the composition unit, they asked for more group composition work and for more integration with the composition classes and the one-to-one lessons and band work. And for the performance unit, they asked for that to be more student-led, with a bit less direction from the tutors. They suggested that the tutors could instead play with them as members of the band. Just as we were considering how best to implement the students' desired changes into the programme, we were given the order to cease all face-to-face teaching on Tuesday, March 17th, 2020, in response to the rising number of COVID-19 cases in Scotland. The programme was quickly moved completely online, and students completed their composition portfolios and sat their online theory exam at home. All students except one received a qualification. One student successfully applied to the popular music programme at Edinburgh Napier University and expressed his gratitude for the opportunity to connect with the university and for helping with his application and audition, citing how much he had learned. Although the 2019-20 iteration of the Creative Musicianship 1 programme ended in a rather different way than how I expected, the experience of taking the initial plan of the programme and fleshing it out, designing assessments that align with the learning outcomes, and then delivering the programme in 2 secondary schools taught me how to design, plan and deliver learning activities and programmes of study, and how to best prepare learners for higher education. And so I'm very grateful for the opportunity. As we moved into the 2020-21 academic year, it became apparent that it would not be possible to deliver the programme in person again, as visitors were no longer permitted on the school premises due to COVID-19 government regulations. If the Creative Musicianship programme was to continue, it would have to change. Bryden and Zach were busy preparing for a year of online learning for the university's undergraduate and postgraduate music programmes, and so it fell to me to figure out how Creative Musicianship 1 could be transformed into an online course. Additionally, we had always intended to establish a Creative Musicianship 2 course in the second year of the programme at SCQF level 6, the same level as a higher qualification, and so I was also faced with the challenge of writing this course from scratch to be delivered online alongside the existing Creative Musicianship 1. It was agreed that we would continue to use Moodle Community as the programme's virtual learning environment. Many of the 2019-20 resources were updated and added to in order to best prepare learners for an online learning experience. As the core video conferencing software used by the university for its undergraduate and postgraduate programmes, Cisco's WebEx became the location of our online weekly group classes and one-to-one instrumental/vocal lessons. Students also signed up to the free browser-based digital audio workstation Soundtrap at the start of the year, as this would go on to be used as our virtual studio for solo and collaborative projects in composition and performance classes. And due in part to its integration with Soundtrap and its beginner-friendly interface, we also asked students to sign up to the free browser-based software Noteflight to aid with music notation-based activities in theory and composition classes. While putting together the structure of the online programme, I felt that it was important to ensure the 2 cohorts did not feel segregated from each other, and so built into the programme plenty of opportunities for collaboration between the CM1 and CM2 students. It was agreed that bands would comprise of both CM1 and 2 students to encourage collaborative music making between the 2 year groups. At the start of the year, students split themselves into 3 bands based on their music tastes and interests. A tutor was then assigned to lead each band. Composition classes also involved both CM1 and 2 students, so that the younger ones could learn from the older, more experienced students. As with the previous year, the programme was organised around a bi-weekly structure, with group classes scheduled for Friday afternoons. But due to it being entirely online, we were no longer restricted to just Friday afternoons, and so it was decided that one-to-one instrumental/vocal lessons would be scheduled at a time that suited each tutor-student pairing. Several changes were made to the course content and assessments, either out of necessity, due to the move online, or to implement the previous CM1 cohort's requests made in last year's feedback session. I took over the delivery of the communication class and ensured that it better linked to the other units by having the students discuss and reflect on their learning across the programme as a whole. CM1 students were set specific music topics to discuss and analyse in their reflective blogs. CM2 students were introduced to academic skills and wrote a reflective and discursive essay in which they reviewed academic papers on popular music education before discussing the ways in which their own music education shaped their understanding of music and their practice as a musician. CM2 students also came up with and undertook their own creative practice projects for this unit. At the start of the year, they identified one aspect of their creative practice to improve over the course of the year and utilised a problem-solving approach in realising a personal creative goal within the parameters of a defined task. Shortly after completing their individual projects, the CM2 students presented virtually at a mini online conference where they each took it in turns to evaluate their learning in the process of carrying out their project. Alongside teaching keys, scales, intervals, chords, and aural skills, I began covering music technology concepts and techniques in the CM1 and 2 theory classes, as I felt that it was important for students to know the theory behind the technology that they were using to create, perform, and record music in the other classes. To make best use of time, I utilised a flipped classroom approach, where students learned about a topic before coming to class by working their way through digital books, audio examples, discussion forums, and short quizzes on Moodle in their own time. Classes could then be used to go into greater depth, clarify points, correct misunderstandings, and put theory into practice through completion of short collaborative consolidation activities. At the end of the year, both cohorts sat an online 30-minute theory exam, which included questions on both music notation and audio tracks. The composition class was integrated more closely with the theory class this year by having students implement learning of theoretical and technological concepts and techniques into their composition work. Students were tasked with creating 3 pieces of music throughout the year, either in Soundtrap or in another DAW of their choice. The first composition was to be created primarily using found sounds to encourage students to think outside the box as to what could be considered music, and to draw upon their surroundings when designing the sound palettes to be used in their compositions. For the second composition, students were provided with a vocal recording and had to write a chord progression and produce a beat to accompany the vocal. For the third composition, students were provided with a chord progression and had to write a top-line melody with lyrics before recording and producing the entire song. As part of their composition portfolios, students submitted rationales to explain and analyse their compositions, and scores, either in the form of a lead sheet or a graphics score, to represent their music visually. For the performance unit, students were once again paired up with a tutor who specialised in their instrument, or voice. At the end of the year, students and their tutors conducted a negotiated assessment to determine the students' mark based on their commitment, preparation and organisation in lessons, and their development as practitioners of their instrument over the course of the year. I asked the tutors to ensure that their one-to-one lessons with their students also went over theory and composition content through the lens of the student's own instrument, so that the student could use their instrumental skills to help them make sense of theoretical concepts and to create new music. The assessment for the ensemble part of the performance unit had to be completely rewritten, as it was no longer possible for students to take part in a live performance exam in bands. Fully aware that students may not all have access to fast broadband at home, rather than trying to get the students to attempt a live performance over WebEx, I felt that it would be more beneficial and less likely to be thwarted by technical issues if the bands were to instead record 3 songs, 2 covers and 1 original group composition, in the online studio environment available in Soundtrap. The bands produced an ensemble portfolio containing their 3 recorded songs and an individual report from each member, so that we knew exactly who did what in each band. I decided to cut down the number of tutors assigned to lead each band from 3 to 1. With less pressure from a looming tutor presence, I believe that this resulted in more of a student-led learning activity, compared to last year when the tutors would often outnumber the students in a band. And although the experience of collaborating online is clearly not as enjoyable for the students as jamming together in the same room, I strongly believe that this experience has resulted in students developing invaluable skills that they might otherwise not have had the chance to learn. Our 2020-21 cohort of students are still in the process of completing the assessments for the CM1 and 2 courses, so for now I'm not able to tell you how many students have achieved a qualification this year. However, from discussions with the CM2 students, those who completed the CM1 course last year, this year's run of the programme has felt far more structured, with the 4 units much more integrated compared to last year. I asked my team of tutors if they would be able to provide some thoughts on what they think has worked well and what may not have worked so well in the transition from a course that was previously taught in person to a fully online programme. Some of the positives that were highlighted by the tutors included being able to organise one-to-one lessons throughout the week rather than having everything on the one day, being able to organise group support sessions throughout the week, meaning the tutors and students could keep in regular contact between classes, and the messaging function on Moodle, which enabled tutors to check in and communicate more frequently with their students and provide questions and resources for them. Some of the negatives that were highlighted by the tutors included audio latency issues over WebEx, which prevented tutors from accompanying their students live, disruption due to issues with broadband or computers, and the fact that some students took time to get used to the flipped classroom approach, resulting in wasted time in lessons, as tutors would sometimes have to revise content with students that was readily available in the online resources and that sometimes had also already been covered in group classes. Overall, the tutors agreed that the transition to an online programme resulted in a learning and teaching environment that differed from the previous year, but one that still delivered a valuable experience for the students, with its educational aims and values intact. To quote one tutor, "In short, I feel it was different, but just as valuable." Another tutor felt that, going forward, more of a blended learning approach would work well for the programme. They suggested that, when it is safe to resume in-person learning, practical work should be delivered in person, but perhaps some of the other elements could continue online. They also pointed out how impressed they were with how well the students coped overall, saying, "I think it is testament to both their enthusiasm and the strength of the course that it has gone so successfully." I wouldn't disagree with any of these points. In fact, now that I'm in a position to be able to look back over the past 2 years of the programme in its 2 very different forms, I am no longer as sceptical of the virtues of an online popular music education as I once was. The students have clearly learned important digital skills that will undoubtedly serve them well in their musical work and beyond. However, despite all of this, I am absolutely looking forward to getting back into the classroom and jamming with the students once more. Let's just hope we don't have too long to wait. I hope that this paper has proven that it is certainly possible to deliver a creative and collaborative popular music programme at high school level, perhaps as an alternative to what could be seen as an outdated, problematic core music curriculum that bears little resemblance to students' own musical interests and activities, as is the case here in Scotland. I hope that it has also shown that such a programme can absolutely be delivered in an online environment in the age of COVID-19, while still providing a high-quality popular music education. Thank you very much for listening. I would now be very happy to answer any questions you might have about the Creative Musicianship programme.
All right, very enlightening. I always like to hear how other people who were in classrooms during the pandemic dealt with that. So really good stuff. We have a couple of minutes for questions if anyone has anything they want to ask Corin before we go.
Presenting the Zooms for questions. I got a couple.
All right, yeah.
Colin, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm here actually in person. I'll come a little closer. So this whole program looks great. I mean, I have so many questions. I was in sort of a similar position for high school here. I'm a high school coordinator for visual performing arts, but I started just 2 months before the pandemic, and so we had to we didn't have anything organized like you did with this curriculum to go online. So we kind of had to make our best. I guess one of my questions was how much, when you transitioned to online, the collaborative part where you had them doing 2 covers and an original song, were the students like kind of given free reign as to what covers and what's like how the content of their songs, or were they kind of guided by a tutor or by somebody curricularly?
A bit of both. They were free to pick any songs to cover. That was the students' decision, but every single band was led by a different tutor. So there were 3 bands, there are 3 bands, and each one is led by a really amazing tutor. So all of the tutors are current students here at Edinburgh Napier or are previous students who graduated within the past couple of years. And so they've been able to guide them. So the initial decision, I suppose, comes from the students as to what songs they're going to be covering, and the tutors are there to help them bring that to life and help them to put their own spin on it, I suppose. So if the students are trying to do something that is way too advanced for them, the tutors might say, well, maybe we can do something a little bit different. Or if they're not pushing themselves enough, then the tutors can step in and you put some other ideas forward. But ultimately, we do want to give as much control to the students as possible. So each band is very much student-led, but a tutor is there kind of overseeing the whole process and making sure everything's going to plan.
And were the, if I can ask another question to follow up.
Yeah, sure.
So were the students, were they, before the program went online, did they have like a primary instrument that they contributed, or were they these like secondary instruments, and were they able to continue that or switch online when they did just recording compositions?
Yeah, well, in the previous iteration of the program, it was very much that the student had their instrument and they played that instrument. So they were all together in the classroom. You know, the bassist would be playing bass, the guitarist playing guitar, and so on. But this year, because it's been online, they can obviously see what everyone else has recorded in their soundtrack projects. So each person can go in and edit that if they want to. They can add their own parts. They can program drums. They can do some cool vocal production. We're encouraging them to start thinking beyond their own instrument a little bit more. And that's actually a really great benefit of this online version of the program that we never really thought would happen, but certainly because it's in an online environment, they're seeing more of that collaboration going on. Whereas before in the classroom, they very much stuck to what they knew and they stuck to their own instrument. So while yes, it's maybe not quite as fun for them as being together in the same room, there are absolutely some great benefits and some really cool things that have come from this course, such as them starting to learn these great technical skills and to start thinking beyond their own instrument.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great question. Yeah, thank you.
All right. If no one has any questions, then I guess that wraps it up. I'll leave this Zoom meeting. Oh, okay, if you want to type your question into the chat, I can read it for you or something.
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. For students who didn't own their own instruments, the school was very helpful and allowed them to, because they were still going to high school, although our course was happening online, they were still going into school during the day. So the school music department was very helpful and allowed them to take home instruments that the school had. Where that wasn't possible in other cases, such as in fact, no, it was possible in all cases. I think we ended up getting everyone an instrument. Yeah, the university did provide a MIDI keyboard to 2 of the students. We had a bunch of old MIDI keyboards that we didn't need anymore. So 2 of the students, 2 of the keyboard players who didn't have their own MIDI keyboards at home were gifted 2 very old MIDI keyboards that we didn't need here anymore. But in all other cases, they were loaned instruments by the school if they didn't have their own instrument already.
All right, cool, very cool. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that was really interesting stuff, and hopefully you guys have a good next couple of days and have equally as informative sessions. So have a great day, everyone. Take care.